Hi people, it's me, the text-to-voice robot, coming at you at Mac 2 with a new auto-generated video. I figured I'd make this video talking about the different strategies and tips you can use to become a more skilled player. I have some personal thoughts on this, but I'll save those thoughts for the end of the video. Note that this is somewhat of a meta video that describes the principles behind improving and not as much a video giving you 3 steps towards becoming a way more skilled player. I basically try and describe the principles behind any kind of steps you could think of to improve yourself. And actually, if you manage to come up with a tip for improvements that is not a combination of what I've said here, please let me know in a comment below. So anyways, let's start off by defining a few things. It's important to make some clarifications and distinctions. When I say better, I mean things like increasing your healing or damage output or effectiveness in different situations, such as solo play, dungeons and raids. It could also be improving micromanagement. It could also be solving more specific problems or overcoming challenges, such as soloing a dungeon. It could be how to level faster, which is a combination of a whole bunch of things. Now, the answer to the question, how do I improve, is actually pretty simple and quick. If you want to get better, just practice. And you're somewhat practicing every time you're playing the game, but eventually just playing the game casually won't improve your skills much. The type of improvement I'm talking about is probably best called micromanagement. It improves skills such as noticing certain details, timing things better, shortening your reaction times and such. To improve this, you simply have to play the game. It helps to experience different situations, so don't do the same thing over and over again. If you want to further your improvement in micromanagement, start taking on more and more stressful situations. A great way to perhaps not increase your ability to micromanage, but reduce the necessity of doing so, is by using add-ons and macros. For example, a click to heal add-on will save you time and makes healing easier. A hunter might want to macro pet attack and hunter's mark into one button. Some add-ons I would recommend is the click to heal add-on for healers, such as healbots. I'd also recommend the details and a threat meter, and a classic cast bar. I suppose deadly boss mode is also very useful, but I actually don't use it myself. Another very important part is keybindings. You should probably have as many keybindings as possible and make them simple and easy. Don't use Shift Control Alt P, for example. Personally, I use the following buttons for keybindings. The button that's to the left of 1, whatever that's called, and then buttons 1 to 9, Q, E, C, V, R, X, F, G, and T. And on top of those, I use a few shift versions of them, so like Shift Q for example. You should also try and have the same type of ability on the same key binding over all your characters. For example, try and have your interrupt on the C button for all your characters. As the situation becomes more and more stressful, you will do what you usually do and not think in new ways. If you're used to press C to interrupt, you're gonna press C to interrupt regardless of where your interrupt is actually located. Place your spells in a nice, clean, simple and logical order. If you don't know where your spells are, things are gonna go bad. You should start building this keybinding stuff at level 1 already. If you've had your abilities at the same place since level 1, it's gonna be in your so-called muscle memory by the time you hit 60. Next, let's move into a very important and big part of improving your skills, which is knowledge. Knowledge about your class, the general mechanics of the game, the spells and abilities you have available, the spells and abilities your opponents have available. There is a lot to learn, so let's divide these things into some useful subcategories. As you surely know, each race has unique racial abilities. They also might have special passives and slightly higher base resistances to a certain school of magic. Some of these ratios are very strong for the right class, such as the humans' increased mace and sword skill for the warrior, or the trolls' increased bow skill and berserking for hunters. I won't go over which abilities each race has, but know that they can make a big difference. As for your class, I'm sure you knew that strength isn't beneficial for all of them. But did you also know that the effect spirit, agility, strength and intellect have on each class kinda differs? Albeit they kinda do the same thing for all classes, but there can be big differences on how much a class gains from each stat. For example, rogues only get 1 point of attack power per strength, whereas paladins, warriors and shamans get 2. Another lesser known difference is that mages and priests have a 25% higher mana regeneration from spirit compared to all other classes. The mage formula for calculating mana regeneration from spirit is something like this: 0.25 times spirit plus 13. For shaman, it's 0.20 times your spirit plus 19. That can make a pretty substantial difference in the end. Another very useful example is the fact that warriors have insane life regeneration from spirits. For caster classes, like mage and warlock and stuff, it's 0.1 times your spirit plus some constant, and that's your life regeneration from spirit. For warriors, it's 1.3 times your spirit minus some constant, so that's 13 times more efficient. So basically, if you want to play as good as you can, make sure to choose the race that's the strongest for your class. Especially in Classic, there are some huge differences between race and class combinations. When it comes to stat differences, they mainly play a role while leveling. At max level, there are a bunch of guides that have already done the math in regards to your best in slot gear, but it could be fun knowledge anyway. There is a lot of reading to do here. At level 60, my shaman has 47 abilities and some racial abilities as well. Each one of them do different things, and you need to know exactly how each spell works to figure out exactly when they should be used. It might be important to know how mana efficient a spell is, what the cooldown is, and which spells it should be combined with, and so on. If you read through all your spells, you will surely realize there were several spells and abilities you didn't understand fully, and some spells and abilities that didn't work the way you thought they did. Just read the tooltip. Learn what they do so you know when you should use them. On top of that, exactly how spells and abilities work aren't always obvious. You might need to do some testing as well. The information given in the tooltip often leaves questions unanswered. A good example could be that many of the shaman's totems, such as Earthbind and Tremor, works by applying their effects every few seconds as a pulse, with a few seconds in between. Basically, if you place your Earthbind totem with bad timing, the slow effect might apply too late or even miss out completely on your target. A good way to get some extra information regarding your spells and abilities is to head over to Classic WoW and look up the spell. There you can learn all kinds of extra things. Understanding how the enemy's abilities work can be very important as well. Here's simply a matter of learning how they work. Classic WoW or guides on YouTube can be quite handy here. With experience, it often becomes rather clear which talents you should pick when filling a certain role. On top of that, you can use class guides to help you. However, it's not always obvious how talents work. For example, the Shaman talent Purification increases your healing done by a total of 10%. However, what the talent does not state is that it only increases the spell's base healing and not your bonus healing as well. Basically, it won't be a 10% increase to your healing output. Another example when things work in a way you wouldn't expect is the Elemental Shaman's final talent, Elemental Mastery. With the tooltip, you'd expect it to only affect one spell. However, if you use it and then cast Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, followed up by an instant Earth Shock cast, or well, any shock you want, both of those spells are going to be free critical strikes. There's nothing in the tooltip that suggests that's how the talent works. Here is a lot to learn as well. How do mobs move? How does auto attack work in combination with this special ability or spell? For example, a warrior's slam ability resets the swing timer, whereas for example Whirlwind does not. This isn't stated in the abilities tooltip, so it's kinda a combination of understanding game mechanics, class abilities, but also testing them. Which obstacles can be used to line of sight spells? What do mobs do when you're in combat with them, but they can't reach you? A game mechanic that is very important to understand is spell batching, and I'm gonna do my best to explain it now. So the way this basically works is that the in-game time is divided into smallest possible chunks. I don't know exactly how long a chunk is, but let's assume it's 0.25 seconds. The way this works is that if you and another mage cast Polymorph on each other, and you started, let's say, 0.2 seconds earlier than the other mage, since these two abilities are casted within the same time chunk, the game will treat it as if you cast the spell at the exact same time, resulting in you polymorphing each other. This mechanic could make a big difference when it comes to interrupting, feigning death, polymorphing, I mean you name it. There are a whole bunch of useful items to know about. The best way to learn about all of them is probably to go to Classic Database, a webpage. That's classic.db.com, I think, or .com. Anyways, a few mentions could be the Riven Spike, which applies armor reducing debuff to your targets, or the Axe Nightfall. There are a whole bunch of helpful consumables as well. Stuffs like mana and health potions, stat increasing potions and elixirs and flasks. If you want to learn about all of these items and consumables, head over to classic.database. You should also check out some class guides if you want to learn about the consumables of interests for you. Now, moving on. Let's say that you have a deep understanding of how your class and its abilities work, as well as general game mechanics. You find yourself in front of a challenge you can't seem to overcome. How do you approach this situation? It's now time to combine your skills, your knowledge and creativity to come up with a way to solve your problems. Which spells should be used in which order? The first thing to do whenever you face a challenge is to think it over. Which are the problems and how can I solve them? Which abilities do I have to counter? How can I keep myself alive? Is there a useful kiting path available? Once you've thought up a theoretical approach to the situation, just try it out and see how it goes. And 9 times out of 10, it won't work. But you will hopefully learn why it doesn't work as well. Alter your approach and go again. And sometimes it might just be a matter of practicing your tactic over and over until you can execute it sufficiently right. Now, when you fail repeatedly, try and avoid getting angry and stuff. Just take a step back and try and understand why it's not working. Perhaps take a short break. And very often, what changes a tactic is the appearance of new information. If you aren't improving, it's not always obvious why. And actually figuring that out can take some effort. So if you're actually serious about improving, a useful way is to record yourself and then analyze your gameplay afterwards. When you're fully focused on watching and analyzing your gameplay, you see more things than you would have seen if you were trying to both play and analyze at the same time. And often, the gear isn't the issue, but of course, having better gear always helps. But perhaps not making as many mistakes could be useful as well. Outgearing something basically means that you're overpowered and have large margins within which you can do plenty of mistakes and still succeed. In some situations, the important part is not how you perform as an individual, but how you perform to help your team, so to say. If you switch focus from performing as good as you can as a solo player to becoming the best raider cogwheel in the raid machinery that you can, you might start to do things differently. Perhaps you lower your DPS a bit in order to not pull aggro, or perhaps you pick talents differently. The key point here is that the things you do in order to help your raid succeed is not the same as the things you do to be as efficient as you can while playing solo. So, if you're trying to become a better raider, you might want to ask the question, how can I benefit the raid the most, instead of how can I pull the highest numbers? Because quite often, the answer to those two questions are gonna be different. Alright, we're soon there. A big part of success in Classic comes from spending the time and preparing for things. This includes grinding consumables and getting your best in slot gear. The game is not too focused around you dealing with very complex situations, but more about you being prepared for the situation in terms of consumables, gears, and strategies. Remember to keep that in mind whenever you're facing a problem. Alright, so finally, I'd like to say some things here as well. So personally, I think that you should play the game in a way that you enjoy it. Perhaps you do enjoy taking on challenges and trying to become as good as a player as you can, and I have obviously no problems with that. But perhaps you don't enjoy hardcore raiding, and then it's completely fine to not do any of the things I've talked about in this video. It is after all a whole world for you to explore freely, and maybe killing boars in Elven forests is the most relaxing thing you've ever experienced. Now, with all of these things said, I hope you found this video helpful. Like if you enjoyed and subscribe to make the numbers on my screen bigger. Cheers!